Sandra's touch stopped. KeanuReeves' theater was silent, the kind of silence that feels alive, heavy, waiting. The audience sat in rows, their eyes fixed on the stage, their breaths caught in a rhythm of anticipation. And then Keanu Reeves walked out. His steps were slow, deliberate, as if he carried something more than just his own body. He carried years of pain, love, and memories that had never been spoken out loud. He looked at the crowd, his dark eyes reflecting both strength and fragility. The room was filled with respect for the man who had lived so many tragedies, yet still gave kindness to strangers. He started to speak, his voice soft but steady, and the words reached deep into every heart in the hall. He spoke about resilience, about how life had taken from him again and again, but still he chose to stand. Still he chose to be kind. But then, as he spoke, his words began to tremble. He paused, his lips pressed together tightly, as if holding back something too heavy. The silence grew louder. The audience leaned forward, drawn to the rawness of the moment. His hand shook slightly as he gripped the microphone, and for a moment it seemed like he might walk away, unable to continue. And that was when Sandra Bullock, who had been sitting just a few steps behind, stood up. She walked toward him without hesitation, her expression filled with quiet understanding. The audience held their breath, their eyes moving between the two. When she reached him, she placed her hand gently on his arm. It was not dramatic, not staged. It was simple, human, and real. That touch stopped Keanu. He looked down at her hand, then at her face. There was no script in her eyes, only sincerity. For years, people had speculated about their bond, but in that moment, it was no longer about rumors or Hollywood stories. It was about the people who had carried each other through invisible storms. His lips parted as if he wanted to speak but could not find the words. The weight of years pressed down on him: loneliness, loss, unspoken feelings. Sandra gave a small nod, a silent message telling him he could continue, that she was there. And with that touch, something shifted inside him. He took a breath, deeper than before, and his voice returned. But it was different now. It carried more than a speech, it carried confession. There are moments, he began, his voice breaking softly, when life tries to take everything from you, your hope, your will, your reason to smile. I'd have lived those moments. I'd have been broken. And sometimes, I thought I would never stand again. The crowd sat frozen, the air thick with emotion. Some had tears in their eyes already, sensing where this was going. But then, Keanu continued, glancing at Sandra. Sometimes life gives you someone who stands with you when the world turns away, someone whose kindness feels like light when everything else is dark. I would not be standing here, speaking to you, without that kind of presence in my life. The audience gasped softly, for they understood who he was talking about. His words were not only about resilience, they were about gratitude. They were about Sandra. He paused again, his eyes glistening now, his breath uneven. He looked at the audience, then back at Sandra. She gave him the smallest smile, but in her silence, she gave him strength. And then, with a voice that trembled yet carried truth, he said, "There is something I have kept inside for years, something I thought the world would never hear. Tonight, I cannot hold it anymore." The crowd leaned closer. Cameras clicked in the distance. And yet, in that vast theater, it felt like only the people existed: Keanu and Sandra. The confession was coming, and it would leave the world in tears. Asterisk, the confession silence in the theater grew even heavier. Everyone leaned closer, waiting for the words that had lived inside Keanu Reeves for so many years. His hands tightened around the microphone, and he lowered his head for a moment, almost as if he was speaking first to himself before sharing it with the world. For a long time, he began, his voice rough with emotion. "I thought silence was safer. When you lose people you love, when you see happiness slip through your hands, you start to believe that speaking the truth will only bring more loss. So I stayed quiet. I let the world see only a part of me. But inside, I was carrying something that mattered more than words." His eyes shifted toward Sandra. Her hand was still on his arm, steady and warm, reminding him he wasn't alone on that stage. She did not say anything, but her presence was stronger than any words. The audience noticed the way his gaze softened when he looked at her, and some already wiped their tears. Sensing the depth of the bond between them, Keanu took a deep breath, and his voice dropped lower. "Sandra, you were the person who saved me when I didn't even know I needed saving. People saw us on screens together, and they thought it was just acting. But what they did not see was the way you treated me when the lights were off. You saw me as a human being when I didn't feel human anymore. Your kindness, your laughter, your friendship, they gave me reasons to keep going. When I wanted to stop, a murmur rippled through the audience. Some clutched their chests, some leaned into each other. The words were raw, stripped of Hollywood shine. They weren't rehearsed, and that made them more powerful. Keanu paused again, closing his eyes briefly. When he opened them, there were tears forming, and his voice broke as he said the next line. I never told you this, Sandra, but I loved you. I loved you in silence. I carried it with me in every role, in every quiet night when I went home alone. I thought maybe saying it would ruin the friendship we had, the one thing that felt pure in my life. So I stayed quiet. But that silence, it became heavier than the grief I had already lived through. The audience gasped. Some cried openly now. The confession was no longer a mystery, it was truth. Spoken in front of thousands, yet meant for only one person. Sandra's eyes glistened, but she stayed still, her hand never leaving his arm. Her expression was unreadable, a mix of shock, tenderness, and something deeper. Keanu looked away for a moment, as if afraid of what he had just revealed, then turned back. I don't know what the world will say after tonight. Maybe they will make stories out of this. Maybe they will laugh, maybe they will twist it, but I cannot leave this earth with unspoken words. I'd have lived too much lost to keep hiding what is true. And the truth is, you changed me. You gave me hope. You gave me life when I thought mine was ending. The entire theater was on the edge of breaking into applause, but no one moved. The silence was too sacred to break. Keanu's single quotes as shoulders trembled as he tried to steady himself. His voice grew softer now, almost a whisper. If the only thing I leave behind in this world is this truth, then let it be known. I love you, Sandra. And in some way, I will love you until my last breath. The room felt frozen in time. Sandra finally moved. She reached up and wiped a single tear from her cheek, her other hand still holding onto him. She leaned closer and whispered something into his ear that the microphones couldn't catch. The audience saw his face change, his eyes widening, his breath catching, his whole body going still. Whatever she said, it shook him. Keanu turned slowly back to the crowd, his face pale, but his eyes burning with something fierce, and then he said, she just told me something that changes everything. The crowd erupted in gasps, cameras flashed wildly, but Keanu's next words were what truly stunned the world. The whisper revealed there in the theater was no longer just silence. It was electric. Every heart beat faster, every eye stayed locked on Keanu. His words had already shaken the world, but now, his reaction to Sandra's whisper left everyone trembling with suspense. Keanu held the microphone close, his hand shaking slightly. He looked at Sandra as if trying to make sure he had really heard her right. His lips parted, but no sound came out at first. The audience leaned forward, desperate to know. Finally, he spoke, his voice unsteady, but filled with raw emotion. She just told me that she loved me too. The room gasped together, the sound echoing like a wave. People put their hands over their mouths, some cried, some even clapped, but quickly stopped, afraid to break the sacred stillness. Keanu's single quotes, his eyes were wide, his face almost boyish with disbelief. He laughed softly, but it was not laughter of humor, it was relief, disbelief, an overwhelming emotion all at once. He looked at Sandra again, his voice breaking. All these years, you felt the same? Sandra nodded gently, her eyes shimmering. She finally spoke aloud, her voice steady but soft, and the microphones caught every word. I loved you too, Keanu. I always did. But like you, I stayed silent. I thought you carried too much already. I didn't want to add more weight to your life. I thought, maybe you didn't see me that way. The crowd erupted in tears and murmurs. This was not a movie script, not a rehearsed scene. This was real. Two souls, scarred by life, standing in front of the world and confessing what they had buried deep inside. Keanu put his hand over his face for a moment, overwhelmed. When he lowered it, his eyes were red, his voice trembling. I spent years wishing I had the courage to tell you. I lived in regret, thinking I missed the one chance that could have made everything different. And now, here you are, saying the words I dreamed of hearing. The audience felt the heaviness of the moment, the lost years, the unspoken love that could have changed both of their lives. Some whispered to each other, saying it felt like watching destiny unfold before their eyes. Sandra's hand moved from his arm to his hand, intertwining her fingers with his. The crowd gasped again, not because of a dramatic gesture, but because of the simplicity of it. It was honest, unplanned, and real. Keanu squeezed her hand and turned back to the audience. Life has taken so much from me. I have lost people I thought I could never live without. But tonight, life gave me back something I thought was gone forever. Hope. A second chance. The tears in his eyes fell freely now, but he didn't wipe them away. He let the world see him as he was, unmasked, vulnerable, human. Sandra looked at him and whispered again, this time loud enough for the microphone to catch. Keanu, it's not too late. We're still here. The audience erupted in applause, unable to hold back any longer. People stood up, clapping, crying, cheering. It was no longer just a theater. It felt like history was being written right in front of them. Keanu smiled through his tears, the kind of smile that had not been seen on his face in years. He lifted their joined hands into the air, as if showing the world that love could survive silence, time, and fear. But as the applause echoed, there was something else in his eyes, something heavier, something the audience couldn't yet understand. Keanu looked down, his expression suddenly shifting from joy to something more serious. But there is something, he said slowly, that the world doesn't know yet. Something I must tell you all tonight, because love is only real when it is honest. And my honesty may break your hearts. The audience froze again. Sandra's smile faded into concern as she turned toward him, her hand tightening around his. Keanu's voice grew low, almost trembling. The truth I am about to share is the hardest one I have ever carried. Asterisk, the hidden truth. Cheers and applause faded quickly as Keanu's last words echoed through the theater. The joy that had just filled the room was replaced by unease. People leaned forward again, their hearts racing, waiting for the truth he had promised to reveal. Keanu lowered his head, his grip on Sandra's hand tightening as if he needed her strength. His voice was low, heavy with pain. There is a reason I never told you before. A reason I stayed silent, even though my heart wanted to speak every day. And that reason was fear. Not fear of rejection, but fear of losing you. He took a deep breath, and for a moment, his eyes seemed far away, as though he was reliving a memory. Everyone I have ever loved deeply has been taken from me. My father left. My sister fought her battles with illness. The women I gave my heart to, they are gone now. Death has walked closely beside me. It has taken too much from my life. The audience sat frozen. Some already knew fragments of his past, but hearing him say it out loud in such a raw way broke their hearts. Keanu's single quotes, S voice cracked. I thought that if I ever told you, Sandra, if I let myself love you openly, fate would punish me again. I thought that if I confessed, I would lose you too. And I could not. I could not survive losing you. A tear slipped down his cheek, and Sandra's hand gently moved up to his face, wiping it away with her thumb. Her own eyes were wet, and she whispered, Keanu, you never would have lost me. I was here all along. The crowd gasped, moved by her words. It was as if the broken souls were stitching each other back together in front of the world. Keanu turned back to the audience, his voice trembling but steadying as he continued. I lived my life with walls around me. I gave love to the world, to strangers, to fans, to everyone I met. But I never let myself take love in. I was afraid it would vanish. I thought silence would keep it safe. But silence is a prison. And tonight, standing here with Sandra, I realized I wasted years hiding in fear instead of living in truth. The theater grew heavier with every word. People wiped tears, unable to stop. Some clutched the hands of those beside them, feeling the weight of their own regrets reflected in Keanu's confession. He looked back at Sandra again. His voice was barely above a whisper. I wanted to protect you from me, from the curse of my losses. But instead, I only hurt myself. I never asked what you felt. I never gave us a chance. And for that, I am sorry. Sandra's voice broke as she replied softly, but it was caught by the microphone. Don't be sorry, Keanu. You loved me in silence. I loved you in silence. Maybe that silence kept us safe for a time, but we're not in silence anymore. We're here. We're alive. And it's not too late. The audience broke into applause again, though many were crying while they clapped. They weren't just watching a confession, they were watching a lifetime of pain transform into healing. Keanu closed his eyes for a moment, letting the sound wash over him. When he opened them, his smile was small but real, the kind of smile that seemed to come from deep inside. He lifted the microphone again. Maybe tonight is proof that it is never too late to speak your truth. Maybe it's proof that no matter how much you've lost, life can still surprise you with love. The audience roared in applause this time, standing up, cheering, crying, shouting his name. But even in the noise, Keanu kept his gaze only on Sandra. His hand was still in hers, and his eyes were filled with something that had been locked away for years' peace. But then, just as the room reached its peak of joy, Sandra's face suddenly changed. Her smile faded, and her expression grew serious. She looked at Keanu with eyes full of something no one else could understand yet. She whispered again, but this time the microphone caught her words clearly. "Keanu, there's something I've been hiding to." The theater gasped. Keanu froze, his hand tightening around hers. The entire audience went silent again, waiting for Sandra's truth. Sandra's secret theater fell into a silence so sharp that even the sound of breathing felt too loud. Everyone's eyes turned from Keanu to Sandra, waiting, bracing. She had been his anchor only moments before, but now her words carried a new kind of weight. Sandra's hand did not leave his, but her voice trembled when she spoke. "Keanu, I held back too, not because I didn't feel the same, but because I was carrying something I thought might break you." Keanu's brows furrowed, his body tense. "What do you mean?" Her eyes glistened, and she drew in a shaky breath. "You were right about silence being a prison. I built one too. I loved you, but I told myself I could never show it because the timing was never ours. When you were grieving, when you were healing, when you were giving your strength to others, I thought telling you would only add to your pain. So I buried it. I buried everything." The crowd hung on every word, their hearts aching. But then her voice grew softer, heavier, as she added, "There was another reason, Keanu. One I never told anyone, and I'm terrified to say it now, but you deserve to know." Keanu stepped closer, his hand tightening around hers. His voice cracked with urgency. "Sandra, please, whatever it is, tell me." She looked straight into his eyes, her lips trembling. "Years ago, when we were filming together, I found myself hoping our friendship would turn into more, and it almost did. There were nights I wanted to tell you how I felt, but then I discovered something that made me stop. I heard from someone close to you that you had promised yourself never to risk love again, not after the losses you suffered. I believed them, and so I told myself I had to let you go before I even tried." The crowd gasped, a ripple of shock spreading through the theater. Keanu's face fell, his eyes wide, his voice breaking. "You believed that? You thought I didn't want love?" Sandra's tears slipped down her cheeks. "Yes, and I thought protecting you meant sacrificing what I felt. I thought silence was love. But now, standing here, I see how wrong I was. I see how many years we lost to fear and misunderstanding." Keanu shook his head slowly, his voice heavy with regret. "All this time, I thought I was protecting you, and you thought you were protecting me. But in the end, we only protected our silence." The audience was weeping openly now, the weight of two hearts breaking under the truth of wasted years. Sandra took a shaky step closer, her free hand moving to his chest. "I'm sorry, Keanu. I thought I was sparing you pain, but maybe I only added to it." Keanu placed his hand over hers, his eyes locked on hers with intensity. "Don't be sorry. If there's anything I've learned tonight, it's that love cannot live in silence forever. And maybe the reason we're both standing here, together, after all these years, is because it's finally time. Maybe tonight is the night we stop hiding." The theater erupted in applause and cheers, but Keanu and Sandra barely seemed to hear. Their world had narrowed to the space between them, filled with decades of unspoken words finally breaking free. Keanu took a trembling breath and whispered, "Sandra, do you believe in second chances?" She gave a tearful smile and whispered back, "With you, I always have." The crowd cried out in joy, clapping, shouting, standing on their feet. But even in that storm of sound, there was still a fragile quiet between the two of them. As if time itself had slowed down, Keanu lifted the microphone again, his hand still clutching hers. His voice was steady now, filled with something stronger than pain. "Hope. We wasted years in silence, but tonight, in front of all of you, I want to promise something. I will not waste another day. Not one." The theater roared with thunderous applause, people standing, crying, cheering. But just as the moment reached its peak, a shadow passed over Sandra's face. She turned toward Keanu, her eyes filled with something deeper, something that shook the joy of the moment. She whispered again, but the microphone caught it this time. "Keanu, there's still one more truth I have to tell you, and I don't know if it will break us or set us free." Keanu froze, his smile fading, his body going still. The audience gasped. The suspense returned like a storm cloud. Asterisk, the final truth theater was trembling with anticipation. The joy that had just filled the room cracked open into suspense again. Keanu stood frozen, holding Sandra's hand, his eyes locked on hers. The world around them, cameras, lights, applause faded into silence. It was only the two of them now, bound by decades of unspoken words and one final secret that had yet to be revealed. Sandra's lips trembled, her breath uneven. Keanu, the truth is, I didn't just love you. I tried to let go of you, but I never could. Even when the years passed, even when the world thought we had moved on, a part of me was still yours. And because of that, I turned away from people who wanted my heart. I kept myself closed. I thought I was protecting both of us. But the truth is, I was only protecting a hope I was too afraid to name. The audience gasped, tears streaming from many eyes. But there was something more in Sandra's expression, something deeper, something that shook Keanu to his core. He whispered, almost afraid to hear it, "There's more, isn't there?" Sandra nodded slowly, her tears falling now. "Yes, the truth is, I once wrote you a letter. Years ago. I never sent it. In that letter, I told you everything, that I loved you, that I wanted a life with you, that I believed we could heal each other. But I was too scared. I burned it before anyone could see. And for years, I lived with that regret." The theater fell into stunned silence. Keanu's face crumbled as he realized how close they had come to a different life. A single letter could have changed everything. His voice shook as he spoke. "All this time, we could have had the life we both dreamed of, but fear stole it from us." Sandra's hand pressed to his chest, her tears wetting his jacket. "Yes, but Keanu, fear doesn't get to steal tonight. We are still here. We are still breathing. And maybe this is our beginning, not our ending." The audience could no longer hold back. People stood, applauding, crying, some shouting words of encouragement through their tears. It felt like the entire theater had become part of the moment, carrying their pain and their hope. Keanu pulled Sandra closer, his forehead resting against hers. His voice broke, but it was filled with conviction. "You don't know what this means to me. I'd have lived in loss for so long that I forgot what it felt like to believe in tomorrow. But tonight, with you, I believe again." Sandra smiled through her tears, whispering back, "Then let's stop living in silence. Let's live in truth. Whatever time we have left, let it be ours." Keanu lifted the microphone one last time. His voice was strong now, steady, carrying through the theater and beyond. "Tonight, you have all witnessed something real. Love is not always loud. Sometimes it hides in silence. Sometimes it waits in the shadows. But love never dies. It waits. It endures. And when the time is right, it finds its way back." The audience erupted into thunderous applause, standing and cheering, their tears mixing with smiles. Cameras flashed, but in that moment, it didn't matter. What mattered was two souls who had carried silence for too long, finally choosing truth over fear. Keanu turned back to Sandra, his eyes soft, his hand cradling her face. "I don't want to lose another day. From now on, Sandra, no more silence. Only love." Sandra's tears fell as she whispered back, "Only love." The two embraced, and the theater shook with applause. It was not the ending of a movie. It was not scripted. It was real, raw, and unforgettable. And as the world watched, Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock proved that even after decades of silence, love can still rise, heal, and shine brighter than ever. To the audience, it was a confession. To them, it was destiny.